Cooper, and I have the pleasure of serving as your city correspondent. I'm joined today by Deputy Mayor Jake Pawlak. JP, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Cydney?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here, but I'm more excited because it's budget season.
Absolutely.
We are right at the beginning of this process, but I know that there are a lot of people who may not really understand what that process actually looks like. And so those are the individuals who we really want to speak to today, okay?
Sure.
All right, so there's been a lot of conversation in regards to city finances recently. Let's start there. Where do we stand as of today?
The city is in very good shape financially. I'm really happy to say that. Obviously, the last couple of years have been challenging for cities across the country. COVID was very difficult on city budgets. And then, as we've recently seen, real estate markets have been volatile. And as a city that collects a lot of its money from property taxes, we've been keeping a close eye on it. But so far this year, we're actually collecting revenue ahead of our projections, meaning that we feel very confident in where our budget is in terms of being on track for this year. We're in the process of putting our projections for next year together, but we feel very confident in the state of the city's finances. Our reserve balance, which is basically our savings account, has twice as much money in it as it did 5 years ago, which took a lot of hard work across multiple administrations to get done. But everything considered, I wouldn't be worried too much about the state of our finances. We certainly have to be careful and responsible with how we spend money, particularly for the next 2 years, because we're at the very end of making our final payments on some of the debt that we accumulated when the city was in worse financial shape. So that's a challenge that we're going to be tackling for a couple of years. But there are no major causes for alarm on the horizon that we can see.
Great. That's great news, JP. Now, one of the terms that has been floating around a lot is Act 47. Can you explain a little bit about what that is, and do we have to worry about that in the future?
We don't have to worry about it. But
Good
what
news.
Act 47 is that's when I said a minute ago that the city was in financial difficult territory a few years ago. Act 47 is the name of the state law that creates for cities essentially what in a business or a personal life you would call bankruptcy. So when a city is insolvent, Act 47 is the process they go through to get their finances back in shape. It provides extra tools for them to correct issues with their budgets. And it also provides a lot of monitoring by the state. Ultimately, it lets a state agency make final approval of local budgets in order to ensure that those municipalities are heading back into good financial shape. So Pittsburgh was in Act 47 status from 2002 to 2018. In that time, a lot of really difficult decisions had to be made in order to get the city's finances into shape. But that work was done. We were successful in exiting the program in 2018. And many of the lessons that we learned during that process are what is helping to keep our finances in good order right now. For example, one of the requirements of Act 47, while you're in Act 47, is you have to look at your budgets on a 5-year timeline. So you have to not only plan your spending for the next year, but project out what that spending would mean for you over the next 5 years. And including increases like the cost of inflation or how those debt payments that you might be making every year stack up if you continue to borrow money. That 5-year window is really helpful in being able to spot rocks, on the horizon. And the city of Pittsburgh adopted that 5-year plan into city code when we were leaving Act 47. So even though we're not in Act 47 anymore, we still use those tools to make sure that every decision we make today, we know will work not just next year, but over the next 5 years or 6 years when we're talking about big infrastructure projects. So that's crucial in keeping the city on the right track, and also how we're able to say with confidence that we think the plans that we've made and the budgets we have adopted are sustainable over the next couple of years.
Nice. It sounds like we've done a lot of pre-planning.
Yes.
Good.
The challenges we think we're going to see in 2025 and 2026, we identified in 2022, and we were already making preparations for them as early as the 2023 budget. So the budget we're in right now, 2024, is the second budget that was already making sure that we'd be ready for the next couple of years.
Great. That's good to know. And I think that's something that is great to share with the public. A lot of information out there, some of it that could lead to some worry. So it's good to know that we're pretty stable as of now.
Absolutely.
Perfect. So one thing that I do want to ask about are essential services. Do we have to be concerned about any of those being cut or interrupted in the future?
No, there's no reason for folks to worry about that. In fact, the Gainey administration, and this has been a point that Mayor Gainey has stressed to the budget team, to his entire cabinet, right, is that restoring essential services is critical. They were, for understandable reason, in bad shape coming out of Act 47. That's where a lot of the cuts that got our books in order came from. And that was a painful necessity for that 16-year period where we needed to get the city's finances right side up. But it's really our charge, and it's what the mayor has charged us with, is now that we're no longer in that position, how do we rebuild our ability to meet our citizens' basic needs for things like refuse service, street paving, pothole patching, cleaning up vacant and abandoned lots. And so we're committed to continuing to grow and build on our success. We've invested a lot in new resources in those areas in the past 2 years. And we're starting to see the fruit of those additional positions and equipment. We're unlikely to be able to grow those things as quickly as we did in the past 2 years over the next 2 years. But we have no reason to believe that we won't be able to keep everything that we've built. And so we'll get to see what those investments can really do in practice for the next couple of years. And then come 2027, we expect to be able to start building them up.
Gotcha. So one of the things that you talked about investments. One thing we have invested very, very heavily in is employees to maintain our infrastructure. Do we have to be concerned at all about having to cut that in the future?
No, we're not expecting to have to cut either the employees that maintain our infrastructure or the infrastructure projects that are already ongoing. Infrastructure projects can take multiple years to complete.
Absolutely.
They have a cycle that starts with planning, and then we move on to design. Design leads to construction, and again, some of those steps can take multiple years. So there is a long period of time where a project might be in the works, and sometimes folks will know in the community that a project has been started, but they won't see a lot of activity. That's usually because it's in a design phase, where there's a lot of work happening, but you can't see it on the ground.
Gotcha.
We intend to continue all of that, and in particular, we've invested a lot of both money, but also time and intentionality into our bridges.
Gotcha.
I remember 3 weeks into the administration, the day the Fern Hollow Bridge collapsed. And that was really a wake-up call for the city of Pittsburgh and the entire region about the state of our infrastructure. It's something that we had known for a long time needed to be taken care of, but it was that event that really brought it into focus. And so I'm proud to say we've invested a lot in our bridge infrastructure, and that work will continue. Again, what you're not likely to see for the next 2 budget cycles is a whole lot of new projects starting. We're going to really focus the resources we have on completing projects that are ongoing. Inflation has affected the city in the same way that it has affected all of us personally. The costs of some of these projects have gone up as compared to what they were originally budgeted for. So our core focus is going to be on completing the projects that are ongoing, and new projects we start are really going to focus on urgent safety issues because we prioritize the safety of our workers and our residents above anything else.
Absolutely.
But no one should expect projects to be canceled or that investment to step backward, just that we might have to, again, be a little more careful in what we start for a few years.
Gotcha. And remember, folks, just because you don't see a lot of movement, that doesn't necessarily mean that work isn't being done. There's a lot of great things going on behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
Happy to hear that, JP. Now, a lot of people out there, a lot of our residents may be having some ideas about what they think it is important to invest our taxpayer dollars or our budget dollars in.
Mm-hmm.
How do we determine what projects receive funding?
So that process starts with public input.
Okay.
In this time of year,
Mm-hmm.
right, we're officially kicking off the budget process with a series of meetings that we'll talk about in a little bit.
Okay.
Where members of the public can come learn about the budget and
Mm-hmm.
then propose their ideas for how they think their tax dollars should be spent.
Nice.
That can be about things like the operating budget, which is where we pay for salaries and a lot of our programs come from. It can also be about the big projects that they'd like to see pursued through the capital budget.
Okay.
We take all of that input that we gather at those in-person meetings as well as online through a number of tools, surveys, even games where folks can create their own budget to understand the process and make their priorities known. Take all that information, analyze it, package it all together,
Mm-hmm.
and then two things happen. For the operating budget, that information is shared with the directors
Okay.
of city departments, who then take that information along with what their staff raise up to them,
Okay.
and they put together a proposed budget for their department for the upcoming year.
Gotcha.
On the project side, we actually have something called the Capital Project Facilitation Committee, which is a big, long word,
Mouthful.
right? Which is just for it just describes a group of people from all branches of government. So the executive branch, city council, and the controller's office,
Okay.
who sit down, look at each individual project submission, and give it a score.
Mm-hmm.
Those scores and the list of projects with their scores are then given to the mayor.
Okay.
And the mayor decides which of those projects ultimately will be funded.
Okay.
In the same way, after his team here in the Office of Management and Budget analyze each department's operating request,
Okay.
make recommendations to him, and then he makes a decision.
Gotcha. But ultimately, it starts with the voice of the people.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Everything starts with them.
Okay.
And then we take that information we hear, run it through the filter of, kind of everyone who works here in City Hall to figure out how to translate the public's vision into something that could be a reality.
Gotcha.
And then that's what gets put in front of the mayor for some of the tough decisions.
Gotcha. So never think that your voice doesn't matter. And when you do have the opportunity to get out there and share with us what you want to see, I think it's important for our residents to do that.
Absolutely.
All right. So where do we stand right now in the budget cycle? I know you said things are just kicking off.
Yeah.
Where do we stand? And then what is next?
So we were right at the beginning, at least of the public part of the process, right?
Okay.
We spend the first couple months of the year implementing the changes that happened in the last year's budget.
Gotcha.
And then we have to be, basically audited. It's the equivalent for us of when people have to file their taxes in April.
Okay.
We have to do a version of that too. So we get all of that done usually by the middle of May.
Okay.
And then from there, we start the process of planning for next year. So we've got our series of budget engagement meetings coming up.
Okay.
We also have due dates out to everyone within the city to submit their proposals, within city government, I mean.
Nice.
All of that will be brought together in July.
Mm-hmm.
And then those two processes I mentioned will start. The Capital Project Facilitation Committee will begin to meet.
Okay.
And the budget staff will begin meeting individually with department heads and the chiefs of our public safety bureaus to look through their request, ask questions.
Okay.
And then all of that ultimately goes in front of the mayor in August and September. And he takes all of that input from the public, from public officials, from civil servants, and makes decisions about what he wants to propose as the budget.
Gotcha.
That proposal comes out at the very end of September 30th.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like we're just getting started.
Absolutely.
It's an exciting season ahead of us. And while these are some of the questions that we hear a lot, we know that you may have other questions, and there is an opportunity fairly soon for you to share those questions with us. JP mentioned them quite a few times throughout the course of this conversation, but we're going to be hosting some community engagements starting tomorrow, Wednesday, June 12th. We're going to be city staff from a variety of different departments. We're going to be in the West End, the South Side, and the Hill District. And we're going to be doing exactly what JP said. Talk a little bit about what those budget engagements typically consist of.
Sure. So it's going to start out with a very short presentation for folks just to sort of get their bearings. Not everyone has looked at a city budget before.
Right.
We want to make sure that everyone understands the basics, how they work, what types of services the city provides that go into our budget versus things that we don't do. Like, you know, the school district has its own separate process, right? So we just clarify all that for everyone. Then they're going to actually sit in groups and have a discussion about their priorities. And then they're going to, as a group, come up with their own proposed budget.
Nice.
So we have a series of things they can choose to fund. They have a limited amount of money, so they can't pay for everything. And they have to go through some of the same processes we go through in deciding what to prioritize and not prioritize.
Nice.
And then the outcomes of all of that will get pulled together so that we'll have a picture of everyone's priorities.
That sounds really cool, JP. I think it gives people an idea of really what it is that your team and the mayor and everybody has to really go through here on city government side. It's really like a hands-on activity type of vibe. And I love that. We actually got trained in it the other day, and it does seem like it's going to be a really cool experience. So I encourage you to come out. We do have another one on June 17th. That's going to happen on the east side and the north side. And then finally on June 22nd, we're going to wrap things up when we host our virtual engagement. JP, this has been a very insightful conversation. I want to thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing, and make sure you come out if you're interested in learning more about the budget engagements. Head over to our engagepgh.com page and look up Pittsburgh Budget Engagements. We're also going to share the link to that page in the caption for this video as well. So thank you again, JP, for sharing all of this amazing information, and happy budget season.
Thank you. Same to you. And I hope to see everyone at our engagements though over the course of the month.
Nice. We'll see you all later.